everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. Well, today's video is the fifth and final video in my series, What I Wish I Had Known as a New Gardener. And we're going to talk today about something that holds a lot of gardeners back, and that is being afraid to make mistakes in the garden. So if you take nothing else away from this series of videos that I've been sharing, I hope it will be that you will embrace my philosophy, and that is that gardening is an art, not a science. Gardening is very personal. There are, of course, plant tags, recommendations, and ideas out there regarding best practices in gardening, and those can be very helpful. But despite the millions of opinions around gardening and how to do it correctly, you are in charge of your own garden. Because gardening is so personal, you get to decide. You get to decide what plants you like and don't like, what advice out there resonates with you, and what kind of time and energy you have to devote to gardening. But the most important thing I hope that you'll embrace is that there is no one right way to garden. The way we truly learn and the way we truly grow is often through experience, and many times experience includes mistakes. Honestly, the biggest lessons I've learned in my garden are not from my successes. Most of the time, the things I learned most from were the mistakes. Before we dive in, if you've enjoyed this series and found the videos helpful, I'm going to invite you to like and subscribe to my channel. Doing that helps me grow in this space and continue to connect with gardeners just like you. So let's get into it. The way that I've thought about today's video and sort of organizing it has to do with the lessons that I've learned that relate to the other 4 videos I've shared with the series. So I'm going to check my notes here as we go through. So the very first thing that I wish I had known as a new gardener is the don't grow all the things. And this is probably the mistake I have made the most, especially in my vegetable garden. At one point I had to ask myself, does it make sense for a family of 2 to grow 12 tomato plants? Does it really? In my case, probably not. You all know I am not a homesteader. I am not somebody that's going to can things and put things away for winter. I mean, there are a few exceptions. You've seen a lot of my garlic growing videos, and I grow a lot of garlic, and I do preserve that and store that in my downstairs pantry. But for the most part, I'm not out in my veggie garden trying to, grow a massive quantities of things that I can or freeze that are going to get us through a cold winter. I've also grown vegetables that we don't really even like, just to see if I could do it. While it's a great idea to experiment, and I do experimenting all the time. In fact, I'll be sharing a video coming up in the next week or so about all the new things I'm going to grow in my garden this year. But truly, I've been more honest with myself about what do we really enjoy eating and what do I want to spend my time and energy on in terms of growing in the veggie garden. The same goes for cut flowers. I'm not selling bouquets, so why do I need to grow 20 varieties of cut flowers, truly, especially when space is limited? So the second consideration for beginning gardeners is soil quality, and I have made plenty of mistakes when it comes to considering the quality of my soil. I started gardening back in the 80s, and actually there were a couple of common practices in the 80s that I absolutely don't do anymore. One of them was the practice of tilling up your garden every single year, especially like a vegetable garden in the ground, tilling that soil. We have learned that that is really not the best practice anymore. So I've eliminated that mistake. The other mistake that I made was using a lot of chemical fertilizers or sprays to control pests and insect damage and pathogens in the garden. That was a very common practice back in the 80s. I have since learned an awful lot and have grown in my gardening to truly embrace using organic methods to grow beautiful plants. One of my biggest lessons I have learned, and I continue to try to fine tune, has to do with compost. And at first, I was absolutely convinced that my compost system, I have the 3-bin system, which I still have, but I was going to create hot compost, which requires using a big heavy pitchfork and turning that compost over and over again several times, making sure it had the right amount of air and water and heat to break it down more quickly. And it didn't take this 60-something very long to learn that I don't have the physical stamina to use that big pitchfork to flip that soil on a regular basis. And so, really, that wasn't a fail in terms of my composting system. I just needed to recognize my limitations and do some flexing and learn that I could create compost and introduce lots of organic matter into my flower beds in my raised bed garden and just use a different type of method for that. All right, that third area, and that has to do with understanding what plants need in terms of sun requirements. And I still make mistakes here for sure, especially when I'm planting something I've never grown before. And I experiment and I am going to be growing brand new plants this year in my garden, just like I do every year. But I think sun requirements is one of the things that I try to get right, but it doesn't always work out. Just because a gardener I admire can grow a plant successfully based on the plant tag, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to do well with that kind of sun requirement in my microclimate. So, learning about the sun requirements has been a humbling lesson, but the great news is that you can relocate your plants, especially if you think they're not doing well based on getting either too much sun or too little sun. I, as you know, give plants usually about 2 months after I planted them that show me that they're in the right spot. I watch and I observe. And if they are on the struggle bus, I'm going to move them. I'm going to relocate it and I'm going to try to give them a different type of sun. So the fourth area has to do with watering, the watering needs of particular plants. And I have a confession to make, and I might have made this confession to you all before, but that has to do with houseplants. I went for many, many years where I could not keep a houseplant growing for more than about 6 months. And then, I just could not keep them alive. And what I finally learned through lots of mistakes and trial and error, it wasn't because I was neglecting my houseplants. It was because I was giving them too much love in the form of water. Once I dialed the watering way back, I discovered my plants did so much better. And my houseplants generally get watered about every 2 weeks. And even then, only a little bit of water. And it has made all the difference in the world. The other big mistake or lesson I have learned through my mistakes have to do with me finally just saying no to fussy plants. For me, that meant letting go of trying to grow fuchsia in hanging baskets. I would bring them home from the nursery and they would look glorious for about 3 or 4 weeks. Oh, yeah. They're very particular about water and sunlight, and I could never get fuchsia right. So if you grow fuchsia and you have success, I need your tips and tricks. But you know what? I just decided I don't have to grow fuchsia because I'm not very good at that. The other big lesson I learned has to do with growing tuberous begonia. They are magnificent, magnificent plants that love to be grown in containers. What I didn't realize for the longest time is they don't like a lot of water. And in fact, they don't even like to be fertilized. As someone who has spent her career in education, I truly love to learn. I am also focused more on learning and growing as a gardener than worrying about obstacles and challenges and mistakes that I've made. Gardening is an incredible journey. It's never over. It never stays the same from year to year. And it's constantly pushing us to exercise faith, hope, and resilience. Mistakes don't mean failure. They mean you are learning. They mean you are paying attention, and they mean you're growing. I hope you'll learn to see the mistakes in the garden the same way that I do. Not something to be afraid of, but a part of what makes this journey so meaningful. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. And as always, I wish everybody out there happy gardening.